Welcome back to the channel. This is 20 Storm and you are watching second part of What If Naruto Gave Up After Hinata's Death. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto froze at the sound of the voice inside his head. "Who is that?" he inquired warily. "It seems, Kit, as if we picked up a STOWAYAY on our trip," the Kyuubi replied, his voice tinged with disgust. "Hello, Naruto, and I hope you don't mind if I join you on this little adventure." Naruto came to a halt, his eyes widening to frightening proportions. "This can't be happening to me," he muttered, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm going to close my eyes and count to 10, and when I'm done, this will all be a terrible nightmare." 1. That isn't very nice. 2. Does he always act like this? 3. Very much. The kid spends most of his life in denial, mostly when he's fighting. He always then kicks the crap out of the guy. Of course, he couldn't do it without me. 4. Naruto's voice had raised slightly as he began to quiver. "I don't know, from my perspective, he didn't need your help all that much." 5. Naruto was getting a little louder. He was greeted by silence. 6. He doesn't really believe this is going to work, does he? 7, 8, 9, and 10. Naruto blinked open his eyes and took a look around. The voices had ceased. With a sigh of relief, he rose from the floor and attempted to walk towards the kitchen, cursing as he fell over again. When he finally made it to the kitchen, he turned on the kettle without incident before dragging himself over to the pantry and pulling out one of his many packs of instant ramen. However, his muscle control was still shaky, so cleaning up all the other bowls of instant ramen that had fallen to the ground when Naruto upset their somewhat precarious balance took some time. He had attempted to stack them back into the cupboard 6 times before giving up. Instead, he interpreted it as a sign that the 7 remaining bowls of ramen were meant to be consumed as well. Naruto poured the hot water into the cup while holding the cup steady with one hand. Or at least attempted to. "AAAARRRGGGHHH." Naruto screamed, hopping around in pain while holding his scalded hand, bashing into various objects, corners, and edges before tripping over his own feet and collapsing onto the ground. "How come this crap keeps happening to me?" Naruto sobbed. "Because time travel caused you to have the mind of a 16-year-old in the body of a 12-year-old boy. To be honest, you're trying to move as if you're still 16 years old, but you're stuck in the titch of a 12-year-old body. I'm not a scam. You're 12 years old and under 4 feet 8 inches tall. You're a midget, no doubt about it. I am not. So, what exactly are you doing here?" Naruto inquired, cursing Kakashi-sensei, who had told him that counting to 10 always helped with problem solving. "Is it 10,000? That could explain a few things about his punctuality." As the Shinigami responded, Naruto let out a sigh of relief. "Hiding? Eh? Who could you be hiding from if you're the god of the dead?" Naruto asked aloud, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "Kami." Hearing this, Naruto closed his eyes and entered his mindscape's familiar area. "What exactly do you mean, Kami? Why would you want to hide from him?" Naruto inquired, his curiosity evident in his tone of voice. "I am curious about that. As far as I know, you two are almost equal in power," Kyuubi said, attempting to poke his muzzle between the cage bars. In his human form, the Shinigami stood in the middle of the sewer. He sighed and sat in the plush armchair that had appeared behind him. Naruto twitched slightly as he did this, finding the thought of the death god messing with his head slightly intrusive. "Look, technically speaking, Kami and I are roughly equal in terms of raw power, but his rather unique position places him firmly above me in the food chain. Due to the fact that he is the king of the gods? Kyuubi inquired. Shinigami's response Raspberry demonstrated his contempt for authority figures. Naruto had the impression that he might like the guy. That has no bearing on the situation. The truth is that he happens to be my father-in-law. Kyuubi's eyes blinked. I don't get it, Naruto, who had never had to deal with an overprotective father, said. Both Kyuubi and Shinigami spoke as one when they thought of Hiashi. You shall. Naruto simply sighed. While all of this is fascinating, it still doesn't explain what you're doing here. The Shinigami rubbed his hand behind his neck in a Naruto-like motion. So, Kami-san was irritated that I used so much godly power to turn back time, claiming that the technique was forbidden, because it destabilized the fabric of the multiverse. We must have been extremely fortunate that the device worked. Wait, Naruto instructed. You said Kami was upset because you used so much godly power to turn back time, and you said the technique required chakra to work. The Shinigami shook his head. I lied. Turning back the eons is a power that no mortal being should have. Kyuubi could do it on his own if he really needed to and had enough power. It simply takes a lot more effort for a demon to perform the act than it does for a god. Tell me, then, what happened to all our power? Oh, it's being used well. Shinigami said with a dreamy expression on his face. In the underworld's court. Arlia crooned, Gami-kun. Where have you gone? You said we could spend the day together. Arlia stormed into her husband's office and found him sitting behind a massive pile of paperwork that extended into the air beyond easy sight and yet remained perfectly balanced. Gami-kun! Screamed Arlia, leaping over the desk and tackling her husband to the ground. He immediately exploded in a cloud of smoke, leaving his wife to fall to the floor unceremoniously. She lay stunned for 5 seconds before another shadow clone poofed into existence. Arlia rose to her feet, her eyes narrowing. There will be a reckoning, she said quietly and dangerously before kicking the clone between the legs, causing it to flee. Naruto's quarters. Shinigami winced, then paled as he remembered something. Oh, crap. Anyway, there's a hole in the rulebook that allows me to match any power you give me with my own in order to use the technique. So, I had enough power to send myself back nearly 5 years? Naruto inquired, his voice full of delight. No way. Shinigami smirked at Naruto's slightly crestfallen expression. You gave me too much power, enough to transport you back in time to before you were born. Naruto's pupils dilated. How come you only sent me back 5 years? The Shinigami shook his head. Although it may not appear so, the technique takes quite some time to master, and I was interrupted about halfway through. Besides, when you become a genin, you only really need to start changing some things, though it might be better if you had a better foundation of techniques to work with. You still haven't explained why you're hiding inside my head. I'm not. I'm inside your seal. It's one of the few places I can stay without being discovered because I helped your father build it. Furthermore, I find myself in the inconvenient position of being in your debt. What? Kyuubi groaned. His host was occasionally a little clueless. Kit, think. You gave him authority. He had to complete a task with the same amount of power. He didn't because he was interrupted, most likely by Kami. Okay, let's go with that. Shinigami reflected on that rather interesting memory involving his wife and... Shaking his head, he returned to what Kyuubi was saying. As a result, he must pay you what he owes you. After all, a god indebted to a mortal wouldn't do. Oh. A slow grin spread across Naruto's face. Shinigami dripped sweat. He didn't like the way that grin looked. So, for the foreseeable future, I've got the god of death as my personal slave? Naruto inquired, his voice full of delight. He fell to the ground as soon as the words left his mouth, as the massive killing intent hit him. No, not killing intent, but something more. The Shinigami simply stood there as the light seemed to flee from all around him, leaving him in a pitch-black area, but he was not obscured by the darkness. He seemed to conceal the darkness itself. The light that always seemed to illuminate Naruto's mindscape changed the man's eyes, becoming a complete, milky white with scarlet-red pinpricks in the center. Then came the cold. Not ice cold, but the chill of a cemetery mist. The cold could be seen shimmering lightly in the air as it moved toward Naruto, whose muscles all seemed to have frozen, with the exception of his heart, which was pounding rapidly. Naruto felt the cold sink into his skin as it settled over him. Before the cold began to sink deeper, a tingling non-feeling glittered over his fingers and scalp. The warm blood in his veins tried to push away the cold, but there was pain where the cold energy collided with the blood pulsing beneath his skin. Naruto collapsed to the floor, gasping for air as the warmth failed him. The cold began to run through Naruto's veins, heading for his heart, causing numbness to spread throughout his body. But it wasn't just that it was cold. This cold was empty as a starless night sky, heartless, and above all, hungry. Hunger clawed at him, not just his body, but him as well. Naruto could almost feel his mind, his ambitions, his very dreams being suffocated by that frozen, mindless hunger as the cold began to slow his heart and make breathing impossible. And then it was gone. Naruto curled into a fetal position on the ground, gasping for air and trying to ignore the lingering void-like presence that the cold had left within him. His heart rate had increased to almost lethal levels. A fiery warmth rushed through his veins, cleansing the last of the taint that had been left within him and slowing his heart, preventing it from bursting. Naruto had never been happier to feel the familiar liquid fire of demon chakra coursing through his veins. He silently thanked Kyuubi as he slowly sat up and opened his eyes, only to push himself backwards when he saw the Shinigami's face only a few inches away. As he spoke, there was no trace of levity in his tone. Remember where you belong, mortal. I've taken an interest in you and, as your demon friend mentioned, I'm in your debt. But if you ever treat me so badly that I appear to be your slave again, I will erase your very existence. It will be as if you never existed. No one will recognize you. No one will remember you, and you will be cursed to wander through the lives of your friends, seeing them, feeling their pain and suffering when you could have helped them. You will see them die over and over, and you will never meet them because they will never even acknowledge your existence. Your loneliness will consume you completely and last 1,000 years. After the Shinigami finished his speech, there was silence. 1 minute had passed. Then there are 2. Then there are 3. Finally, Naruto swallowed and bowed to the Shinigami, his face touching the ground. Please accept my apologies, Shinigami-sama. I have a tendency to act before I think. It will never happen again. I guarantee it. Shinigami simply stared at him for a moment longer before bowing his head and accepting the apology. As long as it doesn't happen again, we'll be fine. How did you intend to pay back your debt? Kyuubi inquired. It appears to me that there is still a lot to be paid. First and foremost, I owe you nothing, so don't act as if I do. Second, I plan to stay here and help the boy with his training and mental development. Oi. Aside from that, I happen to have some knowledge about what will be happening in his world after he was originally sent back, which could prove invaluable to him in the long run. That, along with a couple of other tricks, means I should be able to repay any debt I owe. Yet he keeps you in his debt. Oh? The Shinigami was smirked at by Kyuubi. As an immortal, he and the death god did not always agree and had clashed numerous times over the eons. It usually resulted in them trying to outdo each other, which provided a form of entertainment that neither of them could often enjoy. In the kid's seal, you're hiding from Kami. You never asked for permission and are also effectively invading his mind, which violates more laws than I care to mention. Damn. You are correct. The Shinigami cursed slightly, thinking the fox had gotten the better of him. He then smiled. At that game, two people could win. I have a proposal for you, Naruto. Okay. Naruto was still wary of the death god. After all, he had just been reminded, rather rudely, that he was dealing with the death god as in the guy who was Lord of the Dead and could introduce him to the rest of his subjects in an instant. I need a place to hide, or stay, and while this seal will suffice, it doesn't quite meet my usual standards. So, with your permission, I'd like to make some changes. What exactly do you mean? Well, the seal changes would give me a little more room to move around in, but they would also have a couple of side effects. For example? First and foremost, when the seal was first created, your father and I were pressed for time, so I'll be making a couple of changes that we had originally planned to make. Huh? Shinigami groaned. Consider this. Most Jinchuriki have fairly decent abilities thanks to their demons. Gaara gained control of sand, the Nibi's Jinchuriki gained control of fire, the Sanbi gained control of illusionary mist, the Yanbi gained control of lava, and the Gobi gained control of steam. Need I go on? The point is that we were unable to provide you with a secondary ability. That is not correct. What about my ability to heal? Naruto inquired, slightly irritated that the Shinigami was disparaging his father's sealing work. The Shinigami simply snorted. That thing, please? I'll forgive you because you don't know much about your clan. The truth is that the entire Uzumaki clan has a rather impressive healing factor, far exceeding your bloodline limit. It's the reason the Uzumaki live such long lives. Mito Uzumaki, the Kyuubi's first Jinchuriki, is one of the more impressive examples of this bloodline. She lived from before the founding of Konoha until the reign of the third Hokage, with Kyuubi over there consuming her life expectancy with his demon chakra. Then there's Kushina Uzumaki, your mother. She survived the extraction of Kyuubi despite having just given birth, and a difficult birth at that. How? Because of the Uzumaki's resilience and healing. You have it as well, or how did you think you recovered from all those scratches and such that Kiba gave you when Orochimaru sealed Kyuubi with the 5-pronged seal, At this late stage, I am unable to provide you with any secondary abilities. To do so, I'd have to recreate the entire seal. But I can boost your healing factor and possibly give you a couple of other tweaks. Tweaks? Naruto stated, slightly suspiciously. Shinigami gave a nod. Yes, there will be changes, but it will take some time. Doing it all at once would overload your system, causing you to explode, splattering blood and guts all over the floor and leaving a horrible stain on the carpet. There is a slim chance that this will occur regardless. So, let's get started, shall we? The Shinigami finished with a flourish. I deny it. Kyuubi roared, knowing that whatever Shinigami did next would be disastrous. Naruto collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The force is very strong with this one. Eh? You'd never get it. Dimensions differ. The Shinigami hadn't been working long when he began muttering to himself, and the mutterings grew louder and louder until he finally turned to Kyuubi. He yelled, "What the fuck did you do?" The Kyuubi quavered for a moment before standing tall again. I tried to exit. I tried to get my freedom back. You nearly killed both of us, dumbass. He looked guiltily at the boy's unconscious form. However, it does explain a few things. Like how? Your actions in attempting to free yourself from the seal caused a shitload of cracks to pass through the seal's filter. Your raw demon chakra has been leaking into the poor boy's body at a dangerously constant rate. And where is the majority of the chakra located? That is correct, the brain. It's no surprise that the poor punk frequently acts idiotic. His brain's mental development has been stunted, and his libido is out of whack. It's no surprise he never noticed her in the first place. You've also slowed his development. It's no surprise he used to be such a jerk. The only thing that surprises me is that he didn't die as a result of all of this. So, what do you have in mind? I'm going to replace the seal. I don't really need to do anything to improve his healing factor because he'll be a little smarter and able to grow a little more, not to mention that he'll actually start noticing girls instead of just searching for the attention that they give him. It works like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And it's been battling your chakra for the majority of his life. But I promise to improve it, so it'll be in everyone's faces. Heck, the child may even be able to regenerate limbs if they are amputated. But now that I think about it, there might be something I can do to improve his natural abilities. Shinigami finished improving Naruto's seal in a surprisingly short amount of time, and as soon as he was finished, there was an instant change to the mindscape, or, at least, half of the mindscape. The half beyond Kyuubi's cage had been transformed into what appeared to be a large recreation room, complete with a television, game system, pool table, and a luxurious bed in the corner. In the middle of the room, there appeared to be the floor of a massive dojo. It no longer appeared to be the inside of a sewer. Kyuubi's side remained unchanged. Alright, now it's time for the boy to wake up. Naruto's quarters. Naruto sat up slowly from where he had collapsed onto the floor, his body drenched in cold sweat. URRRGH. What did you do to my head? A tremendous favor. However, it was insufficient. I should have made certain that the fox couldn't harm your seal. So, will you accept my offer of assistance? Naruto's eyes blinked. He was still unsure about having another voice in his head. At the same time, he didn't want to irritate this guy. I'd be honored, but don't you have work? Shinigami laughed. Remember how I said I'd been fighting heroes and the like for thousands of years? You're the most intriguing person I've yet to meet, and I've been bored out of my mind lately. Besides, I've been working since the beginning of time. Believe me, kid. I'm due for some long-term leave. As he walked down the streets of Konoha towards the academy, the blonde knucklehead cursed fluently and passionately. Walking, if you can call it that. His steps appeared to be a little off. Instead of his usual, hyperactive and slightly cocky stride, he was stumbling and weaving like Tsunade returning home on one of Shizun's rare absences. You'd think Shizun would never be sick, given that her mentor was the greatest healer in all of the elemental lands, but Tsunade had her reasons for making sure her apprentice rested. Reasons that Naruto completely grasped. It was really quite simple. There was no one, or at least no one who dared, to place more paperwork on the Hokage's desk now that Shizun was out of the way. There was no one to make her go through all those tedious reports, and, more importantly, no one to steal her hidden stashes of sake or prevent her from going out for a small drink at the end of the day. That meant that Shizun's sick day meant Tsunade's day off. As a result, she was less than completely stable when she returned home in the evening. However, this was not the reason Naruto was upset. Or, at the very least, it was not the sole reason. The real reason for his pessimistic demeanor was that he stank. That wasn't usually a problem for him. After all, running around in a thick orange jumpsuit in the middle of the land of fire meant he was frequently a little whiffy, but this was far more than he was used to. Landing headfirst in a dumpster can frequently have this effect. Naruto had never imagined that he would have to discover this fact for himself. Naruto grimaced slightly and increased the amount of chakra he was sending to his nose to block out the smell as he reflected on what had caused this quandary. He'd been in a hurry to get to the academy. He couldn't wait to see everyone, particularly Sasuke and Hinata. It hadn't taken him long. At all. To realize that Orochimaru had never met Sasuke and that if he played his cards correctly, he wouldn't lose his brother to that snake again. And that was a once-in-a-lifetime offer. He was also eager to see Hinata alive and well again. Plus, class had already begun a few minutes before. Never mind. He'd just jump out the window and go roof hopping. That would save time. Flashback. AAAAAGGGGHHHH. Naruto grimaced. It had not saved any time. He discovered the source of his lack of body control after a brief conversation with Shinigami. Instead of simply merging his 10-year-old mind with the rest of his memories, he had sent his entire 16-year-old mind back in time. Having a much larger 16-year mind holds in the body of a 10-year-old shrimp, it appears that his words, not Naruto's, played havoc with a person's muscle control. Of course, if he had bothered to listen to what Shinigami had to say to him, he would not have ended up in this situation in the first place. But when had Naruto ever learned something simply by hearing about it? He learned by experimenting with his body. Falling from several stories up into a dumpster is acceptable. After that, Naruto conveniently forgot how powerful the being inside of him was for the sole purpose of being able to curse the old man. He didn't mind because he was too busy laughing at Naruto trying to dig himself out of the dumpster. The impact had created a large crater. However, there were some long-term advantages to his situation. Naruto would not have been able to use the Kage Bunshin training technique if the Shinigami hadn't done things this way. If his 10-year-old mind had to go through the trauma of having so many hours worth of memories and experiences dumped on it all at once, Naruto's brain would do the same thing Ino's did when she was forced to keep her mouth shut about some particularly juicy piece of gossip. Explode. All of this had led him to this point in time, when he was lurching down the familiar road, dressed in one of his old orange outfits. Unlike some of the rumors that circulated in Konoha, he had 4 different sets of them. He did have some semblance of personal hygiene. To be sure, it's a small one. It was a good thing he had so many sets because, well, this one would probably have to go because it was covered in garbage. Sniffing with his dulled nose, Naruto tried to identify some of the smells that clung to him. Old milk, fungus-laden bread, 6 different kinds of rotting fruit, with bits of old noodles, rice, beef and pork, but no chicken. However, that was not the worst of it. The worst part was...
Sniff, sniff, Naruto exclaimed.
Yep, diaper gravy, Shinigami said, giggling slightly. Naruto cursed. What did I do to deserve this, Kami? Did you rewrite the fabric of time itself? Stop talking, Baka Fox. I wasn't requesting anything from you. Naruto walked past the Inuzuka compound as he spoke. The sensitive noses of the Inuzuka hounds, and indeed those of the Inuzukas themselves, were assaulted by the potent smell of the stench that hung around Naruto like a malevolent miasma, causing a series of panicked howls and yelps to rent the air. Oh, please. Naruto yelled, his annoyance palpable in his voice. It's really not that bad. Naruto's sweat dropped as he saw the dogs through a hole in the fence. The dogs were now burying their faces in the dirt. Evidently, they believed that, yes, it was that bad. As Naruto walked down the path, he realized that this wasn't so bad after all. One thing he had going for him was that no one around him was giving him those hateful looks. If they had, they would have spent far too much time in his company. The crowd parted ahead of him, revealing a clear path down the road. Naruto grinned. They would do it again one day, but this time out of respect for their leader. Naruto eventually came to a familiar arched bridge. When he saw it, a brief wave of nostalgia washed over him. This was the bridge where he and his team used to meet before missions. After he, Sasuke, and Sakura waited for Kakashi for a couple of hours. Or, where would they wait? Naruto raised his head. Time travel was perplexing. Naruto paused for a moment, deciding to leave that subject alone for the time being. He walked over to the railing and rested his hands on it, gazing out at the plants and flowers that surrounded him. Leaves and flower petals from a nearby sakura tree blew past him, adding to the beauty of the surroundings before falling to kiss the surface of the water beneath him, where the gentle current carried them away. The scene in front of him was so beautiful and serene that it began to relax Naruto. All the stress and tension that had been building up inside him since learning of Jiraiya's untimely death began to drain away. Slightly smirking, Naruto took a deep breath to take in the air and smell of this place, which held so many memories for him, momentarily halting the flow of chakra to his nose. There weren't many people watching Naruto at the time, but those who were couldn't understand the demon brat. He'd been standing there, hands on the bridge railing, a smile on his face, looking out over the river. This smile was unlike the one he usually wore. It was small and subtle, but it lit up his face in a way that few people saw. When he smiled this smile, his sapphire eyes seemed to come to life, twinkling like the jewels they so closely resembled while also alight with a joy and mischievousness that made them appear to be more. Many people didn't recognize him, despite the fact that he was the only person in Konoha wearing that particular color jumpsuit. And it's all because of a different grin. This expression was given a name by Hinata. She called it his true smile, a smile made not only with his mouth, but also with his eyes, those eyes that were usually filled with pain. Naruto, still smiling, took a deep breath through his nose. Everything shifted. He had lost his smile. As the color of his skin matched Gama-chan's, a horrified expression took hold of his features. Then, with the zeal of a lemming, Naruto hurled himself over the railing and into the water below, making a loud splash with his less than graceful entry. One of the nearby civilians' faces brightened significantly. Obviously, the demon felt guilty for its past actions, or, more likely, felt that life in its current, pitiful form was no longer worth living. He went off to spread the good news, a more than slight weave in his stride indicating that he and Tsunade shared something. Either that or Konoha had another time traveler. Naruto sat at the river's edge, scrubbing furiously at his newly sensitive nose. Shinigami had promised to improve his senses, and the death god had kept his word. Naruto's sense of smell had significantly improved. It still wasn't on par with an Inuzuka's, because Shinigami had made sure to make any changes gradual, but it had been increased significantly. He had previously been channeling chakra to his eyes, ears, and nose to compensate for his newly developed sensitivity. However, by inadvertently releasing that chakra, he subjected his almost virgin nose to the agony of his own stench. This was like a man who had been blindfolded for years suddenly having his blindfold ripped off, only to be confronted by a flashbomb that wouldn't go away. As a result, Naruto had done the only thing he could think of. This brought him back to the present, to the bottom of the river. When you think about it, it makes sense. Underwater, you can't smell anything. You certainly messed that up, didn't you? You've only had my improvements for 2 hours and you're already making a fool of yourself. I think I'm going to get sick. Of course, you realize you've probably done some damage to yourself as a result of that little stunt? What exactly do you mean? Shinigami groaned. To put it in layman's terms, you've gone and overloaded your nose. You'll be able to use it to its full potential in a few days thanks to your healing factor. Mind you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Out of all your senses, the change in your sense of smell will require the most adjustment. Oh well, I suppose it's for the best. Now let's return to the surface with you. No. No? It could be waiting for me, Naruto speculated. Do you know you can't breathe down here? Can't breathe up there either, Naruto grumbled as he floated back up to the flight. He first broke the surface of the water with the tips of his hair, then raised his eyes above the surface while keeping his nose submerged. Get started. Naruto let the rest of his head rise above the water and tried to lever himself up by channeling chakra to his hands and pushing up, making sure to virtually stuff his nose with chakra just in case. The key word is tried. His hand went straight through the water, as if there was no chakra present. Naruto tried again, frowning. Once more. Once more. It's not going to work, dumbass. Remember, you only have chakra control over your 11-year-old self. It's actually worse than it used to be. Why me? Why wouldn't you? Stop talking. So, is worse chakra control something else that I didn't notice in the fine print of the legal document describing the consequences of time travel? At these words, Naruto was met with complete silence. It was long enough for Naruto to get to the river's edge. It was starting to make him fidgety. What? He inquired abruptly. Kita, that was nearly intelligent. Fuck you. Anyway, no, the lack of chakra control is not a result of time travel, but rather of my tinkering with your seal. Previously, raw yokai chakra was leaking into your system. That was hell on your control, but you usually had a lot of chakra used to power your healing factor to counteract the damage it did to your system. This is one of the factors that contributed to your chakra coils becoming so gargantuan. It's also what makes you such a jerk. The only reason you had a growth spurt was because you developed a strong resistance to the demon chakra. Plus, your arrow senin got you on a good diet. Seriously, what are you getting out of eating all that ramen? That much of the stuff can't be good for you. Shinigami came to a halt when a feral growl filled the air and Naruto appeared in his mindscape. He growled, pointing an accusing finger at the death god, "You don't mess with Ramam. You're treading on holy ground. I swear by the log that whether you respect the ramen or Shinigami, I will kick your ass." Shinigami dripped sweat. Anyway, the demon chakra, however, did not leak at a constant rate. I suppose you could call the seal a self-repairing dam. The demon chakra would build up until it overflowed, releasing a large amount of Kyuubi's essence into your system, though not nearly as much as when you draw on his chakra consciously. This meant that a large portion of your chakra was expended in order to combat it. All of this was inefficient, and the fluctuations in your chakra caused your control to deteriorate. I simply changed the seal to allow the chakra to constantly leak into your system. What? Are you kidding me? The last thing I need is demon chakra in my body all the time. Why couldn't you? Naruto sat down on the ground and rubbed the large bump on his head. The Shinigami rubbed his fist with a slightly sadistic smile on his face as he rubbed his fist. I wasn't sure I'd be able to touch you in here. This will make everything much more interesting. Naruto paled as the death god's smile broadened into a shit-eating grin. Okay, Now if you'll excuse me, let me explain why I did it this way. Consider this. Which is easier to move? A 2-ton boulder or 2 tons of 10-kilogram rocks? The 2,000-pound boulder. Shinigami's face soared. Right, let me say that again. Which would be easier for a layperson to do? The boulders. Right. So, the answer is simple. Each drop of demon chakra that enters your system is quickly converted and assimilated by your chakra coils. This frees up a lot of chakra that was previously used to heal the damage. My method of operation entails introducing more demon chakra into your system on a daily basis while causing little harm, and introducing more yokai chakra into your system will increase your resistance. It eliminates the fluctuations in your chakra, which means you can get some decent control. Basically, you'll have more chakra capacity, better control, and resistance to demon chakra, all while taking a lot less damage than before. All with a single change to the seal. Naruto's face was filled with something resembling awe as he stared at the Shinigami. You're brilliant. Why, yes, I am. Feel free to bask in my radiance. Naruto entered a shop not long after that, with a henge of himself looking exactly like he did before the time jump, except with black hair, no whiskers, and green eyes. He was still stinking. Flashback. Naruto looked down and saw his reflection in the water. He appeared to be a shambles. Damn. I can't go to the academy in this condition. What's the harm? I look like a shambles. So? He doesn't want the pale-eyed blue-haired girl to see him like this. No, that isn't it. How long have I known you, Kit? Does that sound like a trick question? Please give me some credit. I know you well enough to know what you're thinking prior to you doing it. Unless you're about to do something that completely defies logic. So you can read his mind about half of the time? Actually, less than half the time. I need to change at home. If you do that, you might as well not go to the academy today. Go to the nearest store and buy some new clothes. Then destroy these. Are you going to tell me that you have an aversion to orange as well? Naruto inquired, suspiciously. Shinigami sighed, knowing this would not be the last time. No, I have nothing against orange. I just assumed you wanted to get rid of that odor. That's all right. Let's go shopping now. Naruto, on his way to the nearest store, came to a halt and shuddered. Shinigami-sama? Yes? Kick me the next time I say something that sounds exactly like Ino. Please? I was already thinking about it. I appreciate it. Naruto charged away, only to trip and slide about 4 meters across the gravel on his face. He sat up, wincing, feeling the cuts on his face close up and heal at a remarkable rate. However, he became aware of something. Even though he was healing faster than usual, that didn't mean it wasn't painful. Okay, enough is enough. Henge. Naruto transformed into his 16-year-old self and ran to the store with the grace of a ninja. He'd changed his appearance after Shinigami pointed out that he was the only one with those rather distinctive whisker marks, and people would start to wonder why he was walking around in a henge, not to mention the questions he'd be asked if people discovered he knew exactly how he'd look when he was older. Apparently, such behavior raises suspicion. They didn't have any orange jumpsuits, so Naruto had to make do with something else. Tell you what, kid, you're going to need some clothes that don't draw too much attention, so why don't you let me pick them out for you? If you do, I might even tell you about your secondary ability. Gamma-chan was eventually completely empty. Naruto now wore a pair of black cotton pants that were form-fitting but not too tight. His gray shirt was long-sleeved and fitted, and he wore a black hoodie over it. His feet were dressed in leather boots. The black clothes were all faded, not pitch black. Rather, Shinigami said they would allow him to blend in with the shadows of the night. Who knew that the god of death had a thing for black? Despite this, the Shinigami refused to reveal his ability until he had finished the outfit. He needed more money to buy the matching matte black chainmail shirt, vambraces, and greaves before he could tell his second resident. His most recent purchase was a deodorant bottle. The smell, on the other hand, disappointed him. However, the Shinigami and Kyuubi both forbade him from purchasing that one. Flashback. Hey. This one smells exactly like ramen. No. Naruto dropped the bottle and picked a new one at random, stunned by both the tone of voice and the fact that the two immortals had actually agreed on something. Aside from masking the rest of the odor, Naruto discovered that the deodorant was extremely effective at eliminating the source of the foul odor. Kyuubi instructed him to spray while holding a lit match or lighter in front of the can. Naruto was taken aback at first by the burst of flame that appeared and took care to maintain control of it. His now dry jumpsuit, however, was soon crackling away in a small metal rubbish bin. Kyuubi's knowledge of this trick was a mystery he refused to reveal, though Naruto did overhear him mutter something about a troublesome woman. Naruto stood outside his class's door, staring at the doorknob. He'd been standing there for the previous 2 minutes. Why? He was terrified. He had traveled back in time for 5 years. And it was only now that he realized what that could possibly mean. He could see what was going to happen. He had the ability to influence what happened. But with each change he made, the future he knew changed as well. He only had 3 main goals right now. Stop Jiraiya from dying. Prevent Sasuke from leaving the Konoha. Hinata life chans must be saved. That was not necessarily the order in which they were important. Naruto entered the room, taking a deep breath. As a short figure dressed in black entered the room, Iruka paused her lecture. Walking, if you can call it that, as the figure stumbled all over the place. Can I assist you? From beneath the shadows of his hood, the boy looked at him in confusion, but seeing his face, Iruka recognized the whisker marks on his cheeks. When he pulled the hood down, the shock of blonde hair confirmed his suspicion. Greetings, Iruka-sensei. Naruto. Do you know what time it is? Iruka yelled as she applied the big-headed jutsu to him. Naruto covered his ears with his hands. He wasn't used to how much louder even the most insignificant things sounded to him. He had reduced the amount of chakra that blocked each of his senses at Shinigami's urging in an attempt to get used to them, but he could do without all the shouting. Please. Not quite as loud, he muttered something. Iruka fixed his gaze on his student. He didn't like yelling at Naruto, but... So, Naruto. Would you like to explain to the class why you are 5 hours late today? I apologize for that, Iruka-sensei. You wouldn't believe me if I told you why I'm late. Naruto. Naruto resorted to an old standby in his search for an excuse. I came across this poor old lady carrying groceries and had to assist her in getting them home, after which I became lost on the road of life. Liar. Naruto perspired. Was there a universal reaction to that excuse? At the very least, the distraction had allowed him to come up with something plausible. Fine. I overpaid for the sulfur and underpaid for the fuse. Happy? What? Naruto winced again. I also believe I blew an eardrum. Iruka simply sighed. Naruto, take a seat. Naruto swallowed and turned to face the rest of the class. His gaze was drawn immediately to the girl in the back row. Naruto did everything he could to keep the tears from welling up in his eyes as he walked towards the back of the class, unconcerned about the tables he bumped into along the way. Hinata's day had not gone well. At the breakfast table, her father had been his usual cheerful self, praising Hanabi for all of her accomplishments while simultaneously degrading Hinata with every word. Then Neji, who had been waiting for her outside, went on another fate trip, telling her that she was fated to fail for the rest of her life, that it would have been better if she had never been born, and that she should leave. She was unloved and would always be unloved because no one would accept someone as pitiful as her. In tears, she had fled the Hyuga manor.
And when she arrived at the academy, he was nowhere to be found.
Naruto is capable of doing so at any time. Whatever had happened to her, being in the same room as her crush took away the heaviness that had too often burdened her heart. But he hadn't shown up. She had sat alone during recess, watching all the other kids, the ones who had friends, play together. No one had tried to include her, and the few times she had mustered the courage to try to join a group, there was always someone who said something that shattered her meager confidence. She'd spent the majority of her lunchtime crying in a corner. She has no friends, her mother has died, her once kind uncle has died as a result of her, an unloving father, a disdainful sister, and a hating cousin. Was she doomed to be alone and unloved? No. She was not going to let her cousin get to her. Her family may not have loved her, but Kurenai-san did. She was not going to give up on herself. No matter how many times he fell, Naruto-kun never gave up. So, when the bell rang, she washed her face, dried her eyes, and returned to class, leaving no one the wiser. And then he entered the classroom. Hinata took a deep breath and exhaled it, feeling much of the tension she had been holding in her body release as she overheard Naruto and Iruka conversation. Sensei's she was surprised when she opened her eyes. Naruto fixed his gaze on her. At her. Hinata watched him approach her, his bright blue eyes never leaving her face. As he stood beside the free seat next to Hinata, Naruto smiled. He said quietly, "Hey Hinata. Does it bother you if I sit here?" Hinata shook her head, her face flushed bright red. "That's perfect. Naruto-kun. I'd be delighted for you to sit next to me." He took his seat and smiled at her, causing her to turn a shade of red that Naruto had only ever seen on her face before. "Don't faint, don't 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 faint." Dawn, her face gradually returned to a pale pink color. Hinata took several deep breaths to center herself before noticing Naruto's scent inadvertently. Ramen, sandalwood, slightly smoky, cinnamon. Hinata returned to a red color after catching her thoughts. "Don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint, don't faint." She had not yet regained control of herself when the object of her affection leaned in close and took her hand in his. "It's great to see you today, Hinata-chan," he said. Hinata locked her gaze on Naruto. "He addressed me as Chan. He's got my hand." Hinata passed out. Naruto laughed. He was relieved to learn that his friend was still alive. He smiled happily as he looked around at his classmates, ignoring the cannon fodder. Sakura and Ino were fighting for Sasuke over his head because he had made the mistake of sitting in the middle of a desk. Choji was eating a bag of chips as usual, and Shikamaru was sleeping on his desk as well. Kiba appeared bored while speaking with Akamaru, and Shino was, well, Shino. He returned his gaze to Iruka-sensei, a smile still on his face. Naruto. What became of Hinata? Naruto wore a worried expression. I'm not familiar with Iruka-sensei. I just talked to her, and she turned bright red and collapsed. Do you believe she is ill? Iruka sighed and returned to her lesson. But never mind. We're going to start the henge today. Naruto paled as he realized the one thing he had never considered when going back in time. He'd have to go through 2 more years of academy schoolwork. Shit. He returned his attention to Iruka. The henge is a relatively weak transformation genjutsu that alters one's appearance. Does it have no physical effect on the body? Have any questions? Naruto's hand shot into the air, surprising Iruka. Are you sure, Naruto? Does that mean that even if you use the henge to make yourself taller or bigger, you'll still be the same size? Naruto, I just said that. The henge is a genjutsu of E level. What you're describing is known as a true transformation. It would entail redistributing and actually increasing your body mass solely through chakra. The Akamichi are the only ones capable of doing anything like that. Even they, however, cannot change their appearance at the same time. A technique like that would be considered an A-level ninjutsu. Naruto's mind blanked out as he remembered transforming into his 16-year-old self and running with perfect control, fighting with pain as he transformed his clones into rubble that hit the ground from a great height and did not disperse, and finally, having Sasuke throw him as a transformed windmill shuriken. He did the best he could. He laughed and threw back his head.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.